Daniel had always believed space was full of mysteries, but nothing prepared him for what he found that day. His small repair craft drifted at the edge of a lonely star system. The scanners on his console flickered with strange readings, wild energy surges that looked like the death cry of something massive. He thought it might be debris from a battle, maybe wreckage floating in silence, but the signal was too strong to ignore. His hands moved across the controls, guiding his ship toward the source. When the wreck finally came into view, Daniel could not breathe for a moment. It was not a simple cruiser or freighter. It was a ship unlike anything he had ever seen. The alien vessel stretched across the void like a wounded beast. Its armor was black and silver, curved as if grown rather than built, glowing faintly even in ruin. Long cracks scarred its surface, and pieces of shattered metal floated around it like bones scattered after a fight. It looked majestic even in its broken state, and Daniel felt like an intruder staring at something sacred. He hesitated. Human Command had strict rules. If you found alien technology, you reported it. You did not approach, but he was an engineer, and his instincts shouted louder than the rules. Something in him wanted to see what kind of mind had built such a ship. Something else whispered that there might be survivors. If someone was alive inside, leaving them here would feel like a crime. Daniel docked his little ship against a torn section of the alien hull. The airlock hissed as he forced a connection. His suit sealed tight around him, and he stepped into darkness. The alien corridors were strange. Organic curves instead of sharp angles, glowing veins of light running along the walls. It felt less like a machine and more like walking inside a living creature. His boots echoed softly, the only sound in the silence. He moved deeper, guided by the faint signals on his scanner. Most of the ship was dead, but one section still showed power. He followed it, heart beating faster, until a heavy door opened with a hiss. Inside he found her. The chamber was large, filled with dim light. At the center, lying against a shattered throne-like chair, was a figure unlike any he had ever seen. She was tall, her skin pale with a faint glow, her form regal even in injury. A crown-like crest rose from her head, and her eyes opened as he entered, sharp, golden, and filled with fire. She was no ordinary alien. She was a queen. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. He had expected corpses or machines, not someone alive. Someone watching him with such intensity. She did not look weak, even though her body bore wounds. She looked like someone who had commanded fleets and would not bow, even on the edge of death. You. Her voice rang out, deep and melodic, though accented strangely in his translator. Human. Daniel froze, surprised she knew what he was. He raised his hand slowly, showing he carried no weapon. I mean no harm, he said. His words felt small in the vastness of her presence. I saw your ship. It's broken. I thought maybe someone needed help. Her eyes narrowed, studying him as though she could see through his every thought. Then, to his surprise, she laughed softly. It was not a cruel laugh, but one touched with disbelief. A human offering help to a queen of the stars, she whispered. What irony. She tried to rise but faltered. Daniel instinctively stepped forward, but she lifted a hand, warning him to keep his distance. Do not mistake me for weak, she said sharply. I am Soraya, sovereign of the Sharon Dominion. Even fallen, I am no less than what I am. Daniel nodded slowly, feeling the weight of her pride. I believe you, he said. But if you want your ship to fly again, you need me. I'm an engineer. I can repair systems. I can. Her golden eyes fixed on him with sudden intensity. You will repair my ship, she commanded. Not for kindness. Not for pity. You will do it because I demand it. Daniel's heart raced, but he did not back away. Something inside him, some mixture of fear and fascination, urged him forward. He looked at her broken throne, the ruined chamber, the faint tremble in her limbs. She was powerful, yes, but she was also alone, and despite her command, there was a hidden plea in her voice that she could not hide. All right, Daniel said quietly. I'll help. But if we do this, it has to be together. I can't repair this ship without you telling me what half these systems are. For the first time, the queen tilted her head and studied him differently. He was not groveling. He was not afraid enough to run. Instead, he stood before her as though she were another person, not just a ruler. Something flickered in her golden eyes, curiosity, perhaps even respect. She gave the smallest nod. Very well, human, she said. You will serve me in this. Fail me and your life ends here. Succeed. Her voice softened for just a moment. "And perhaps you will see wonders no other human has ever known." Though every machine had rules and rules could be learned. As he worked, Soraya stood behind him, tall and watchful despite her wounds. "You touch what you do not understand," she said, her voice low but firm. Daniel gave a small smile without looking back. "That's what humans do best. We explore, we test, we break, and then we fix." Her golden eyes narrowed. "And often you destroy." "Sometimes," Daniel admitted, tightening a connection. "But sometimes we build something better than before." For a moment, silence stretched between them. He wondered if she thought his words arrogant. Then he heard her soft exhale, almost like a sigh. When he turned slightly, he caught a glimpse of her expression. Not anger, but something else. Curiosity. Hours passed as Daniel worked, guided partly by instinct and partly by the hints Soraya offered. She was cautious at first, only giving short explanations, but gradually she began speaking more. He learned that the glowing veins on the walls were conduits of living energy, a technology that merged biology with machinery. To her people, repairing such a ship was a sacred duty. Watching a human do it was, in her words, like asking a child to shape lightning. Yet Soraya could not deny his progress. Systems that had been silent for days began to hum faintly under his hands. Small lights flickered back to life. A monitor showed a weak pulse of the main reactor's core. The ship was not healed, but it was breathing again. "You are bold," Soraya admitted, though her voice carried a reluctant edge. "And clever. Perhaps too clever for your own kind." Daniel leaned back, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Clever isn't enough. This ship needs more than quick fixes. If we want it to fly again, we'll need to rebuild entire systems." Her gaze lingered on him. "We?" she repeated. "Yes, we," Daniel said firmly. "I can repair circuits and reroute power, but I don't know how your ship thinks. You'll have to guide me. Unless you want me to guess, and I doubt you'd enjoy that." For the first time since meeting him, Soraya gave a small smile, not mocking, but genuine. It lasted only a second, but Daniel noticed. As they moved deeper into the ship, he asked her about the battle that had brought the vessel down. She was quiet at first, as though weighing the cost of sharing truth with a stranger. Finally she spoke. "A rival empire sought my capture," she said. "They struck with numbers, believing numbers could overwhelm will. My fleet was scattered. My flagship, this ship, took the brunt of their fury. But I would not fall to them, not while I still drew breath." Her voice hardened, filled with steel. Daniel understood then that she was not simply proud. She carried the weight of command, the responsibility of an entire dominion resting on her shoulders. "Sounds like you fought until the end," he said quietly. "The end has not come," Soraya corrected sharply. "Not for me. Not for my people," Daniel nodded, returning to his work. He admired her determination, though he could see the exhaustion hidden behind her words. She was strong, but she was also wounded, and her empire was far away. For now, all she had was him. Later, as Daniel adjusted power lines in a narrow corridor, the ship trembled suddenly. A warning siren pulsed faintly in alien tones. Soraya stiffened, her golden eyes flashing. "Scavengers," she said coldly. Daniel frowned. "Scavengers?" "Predators who feast on the bones of the fallen," she explained. "They smell weakness. They come now to strip what is mine." Daniel's stomach tightened. He had seen scavenger fleets before, small ships that swarmed like vultures, tearing apart wrecks for anything of value. Against a crippled vessel, they would be merciless. "Can the defenses still work?" Daniel asked quickly. "Not without power," Soraya said. Then her gaze shifted to him. "But you have already awakened parts of my ship." "Perhaps." She left the word hanging, but Daniel understood. He pushed himself harder, racing to reroute energy to the defense systems. Sparks stung his hands as he forced alien conduits together, coaxing life into circuits that had nearly died. Beside him, Soraya issued commands in her strange language, her voice carrying authority even to systems barely able to respond. Outside, the scavenger ships closed in, their claws ready to tear. Inside, Daniel and Soraya worked side by side, their movements desperate but sharp. At last, a hum filled the air, rising to a deep vibration that shook the walls. Lights flared along the ship's outer skin, and hidden cannons emerged from broken panels. The scavengers, once bold, faltered as beams of energy lanced out from the wounded vessel. Daniel grinned despite himself. Looks like your ship still has some fight left. Soraya's lips curved slightly, the shadow of another smile. As do I, and as do you, human. Together they watched as the scavengers scattered, unwilling to face a ship that refused to die. For the first time, Daniel felt not like an intruder, but like a partner in survival, space where their attackers had fled. You did well, she said at last. Daniel gave a tired laugh. Thanks, though I'm pretty sure I almost fried myself 10 times to make it happen. Her head tilted slightly as though she was studying him again. You risked your life for a ship that is not your own, for a queen who owes you nothing. Why? Daniel shrugged, adjusting a loose strap on his toolkit. Because it was the right thing to do. You needed help. I was there. Simple as that. Her eyes lingered on him, as if she could not quite believe his answer. To her, the galaxy was full of power struggles and hidden motives. The idea of someone helping simply because they chose to felt strange. For the next hours, they worked in silence. Daniel crawled through maintenance shafts, reconnecting systems that had not seen power in days. Soraya guided him with quiet instructions, speaking when necessary but never wasting words. Daniel noticed how her tone shifted, less commanding now, more like a partner giving direction. By the time he returned to the main chamber, his clothes were smudged with grease and his hands ached, but the results were clear. More lights glowed across the ship's walls. A faint hum spread through the floor as engines stirred weakly in their chambers. The ship was not ready to fly, but it no longer felt like a corpse. Daniel set down his tools and stretched. Your ship's a fighter. She doesn't want to give up. Soraya touched the wall with her hand, her expression unreadable. This vessel has carried me through 100 battles. She is more than steel and power. She is memory. She is loyalty. That is why I will not abandon her. Daniel watched her silently for a moment. She spoke of the ship the way some people spoke of family. He could see the bond between her and the vessel. It was not only a tool of war, but a part of her life. The moment was broken by a sudden alarm. Red symbols flashed across the monitor. Daniel quickly leaned over the console, frowning at the translation provided by his suit system. Proximity alert, he said. Something big out there. Soraya's expression hardened. Not scavengers this time. The screen lit up, showing a massive vessel emerging from the shadows. Its hull was jagged and dark, armed with weapons that gleamed like hungry fangs. Daniel's stomach twisted. This ship was no scavenger craft, it was a warship, and it dwarfed his own repair vessel 1,000 times over. Soraya's eyes narrowed. They followed the scent of weakness. My enemy has returned. Daniel felt a chill. The same ones who crippled your ship? Yes, she answered, her voice low and steady. The Krail Dominion. They seek to claim me as a trophy. The enemy ship began to release smaller crafts, swarming toward the damaged vessel like wasps. Daniel's mind raced. Their defenses had power, but not enough to withstand a fleet this size. If they fought head-on, they would be torn apart. We need another plan, Daniel said quickly. We can't just sit here and let them hammer us. Soraya's gaze sharpened. What do you suggest, human? Daniel swallowed. His thoughts spun through the systems he had seen. The weak reactor, the half-alive engines. There was no simple solution, but perhaps there was a dangerous one. If we reroute all power to the main energy core, we could create a wave strong enough to overload their smaller ships. It won't destroy the big one, but it might buy us time. Soraya studied him, silent for several seconds. Then slowly she nodded. Risky, reckless, very human. A faint smile touched her lips. But it may work. Together they rushed to the reactor chamber. The core pulsed faintly, glowing like a dying heart. Daniel opened the panels, his fingers moving quickly as Soraya chanted commands to the ship in her own language. Systems obeyed reluctantly, as if they too feared the strain. The enemy ships closed in, firing beams that rattled the hull. Daniel's hands shook, but he forced himself to stay focused. He twisted conduits together, redirecting every drop of power into the core. Warning lights flared red, and heat poured through the chamber as the reactor swelled with energy. Now, Daniel shouted. Soraya raised her hand and the ship obeyed. A surge of raw energy exploded outward in a blinding wave, slamming into the enemy crafts. Smaller ships shattered instantly, their fragments spinning into space. Even the massive warship staggered, its shields flickering under the blast. The ship's core dimmed dangerously, leaving the vessel trembling and weak. Daniel collapsed against the console, his chest heaving. Please tell me that was enough. Soraya looked at the monitor. watching as the warship slowly pulled back, its systems damaged. At last it turned away, retreating into the shadows of space. Her golden eyes softened as she turned to Daniel. "Enough for now." Daniel gave a shaky laugh. "I'll take that." The ship was wounded again, nearly drained of life, but they had survived. Daniel looked at Soraya and saw something new in her eyes. Not only command or pride, but respect, perhaps even trust. "You fought well," she said quietly. Daniel smiled, despite the exhaustion weighing on him. "So did you. Guess we make a pretty good team." Soraya did not answer immediately. She only looked at him for a long moment, and then, for the second time since they had met, she smiled. The battle was over for now, but the ship felt weaker than before. Its lights dimmed and flickered like a candle struggling against the wind. Daniel sat on the floor of the reactor chamber, his back against the wall, breathing hard. His body ached from the effort, and his hands were blistered from the heat of the conduits. Soraya stood tall even though fatigue pressed against her shoulders. The golden glow of her eyes dimmed slightly, but her voice remained steady. "We have bought time. The Krail will not give up, but they will need to recover before they return." Daniel nodded slowly. "Time is good. We can use it to get more systems back online. Maybe even get engines running again." Her gaze lingered on him. There was something in her eyes now, not just the authority of a ruler but also a question, as if she wondered why he still stayed, why he still fought for a ship that was not his. Later, when the alarms grew quiet, they returned to the central chamber. The throne was cracked and half broken, yet Soraya still moved toward it with the dignity of someone who belonged there. She lowered herself carefully, wincing faintly from her wounds, but her pride never allowed her to show weakness for long. Daniel leaned against a console, wiping grease from his hands. He hesitated before speaking. "You know, most people I've met in the galaxy, they see humans as weak, small players lucky to survive between giants." Soraya's eyes shifted to him, sharp and thoughtful. "And what do you believe?" Daniel smiled faintly. "I believe survival takes more than strength. Sometimes it takes stubbornness. Sometimes it takes hope. We don't give up even when we should." For a long moment, Soraya was quiet. Then, unexpectedly, she spoke of her own life. "When I was a child," she began slowly, "I was raised in the palace of the Sharon. Every moment of my life was prepared for rule. I was never allowed to falter, never allowed to be weak. To them, I was not a girl. I was already their queen, even before I wore the crown." Her voice softened, and her golden eyes seemed distant, as if she were looking back across years. "Do you know what it is to live without trust? To stand surrounded by thousands and yet be alone? Even my victories taste hollow because they are victories for an empire, not for myself." Daniel listened quietly. He had never imagined an alien queen would share something so personal. "That sounds heavy," he said. "Like carrying a weight that never leaves." She gave a bitter smile. "A weight I never asked for. But duty does not ask. Duty commands." Daniel stepped closer, resting a hand lightly on the console near her. "Maybe, but everyone needs someone they can just be themselves with. No throne, no crown, just a person." Her eyes flicked to him, and for the first time her stern mask seemed to soften. She studied his face carefully, as if measuring his words, wondering if he truly believed them. Then, to his surprise, she let out a quiet laugh. "Humans," she said, shaking her head slightly. "You speak so boldly as if the galaxy can be solved with simple truths." Daniel grinned. "Sometimes simple truths are the hardest to admit." For the first time since he had met her, Soraya's lips curved into a smile that was not sharp or guarded. It was small but real. It lit her face in a way Daniel had not expected. A glimpse of someone who carried more than power, someone who carried longing. The moment passed quickly when the ship trembled again, though this time it was not from attack. Systems deep within the vessel were straining as they drew on limited reserves. Daniel hurried to the console and frowned. "The repairs we made are holding, but the power drain is too high. If we keep running this way, the ship will burn itself out." Soraya rose from her cracked throne, her strength returning to her posture. "Then we will find another way." Together, they moved through the corridors, inspecting damaged areas. Daniel crawled through collapsed tunnels while Soraya used her knowledge of the ship's living systems to guide him. They worked in sync now, no longer strangers but partners with a shared goal. At one point, Daniel slipped while climbing over a broken section. of floor. He caught himself just in time, his boots slipping on scorched metal. Soraya extended her hand, steadying him with surprising strength. For a second, their eyes met, and Daniel saw not just a queen but a woman who had chosen to trust him. "Careful, human," she said softly. "I cannot repair you if you break." Daniel chuckled, though his heart beat faster. "Guess I'll try to stay in one piece, then." As they continued, Daniel noticed more about her. She was proud, yes, but beneath that pride was a loneliness he understood. She had been surrounded by people her whole life, yet she had no one she could truly speak to. He wondered if that was why she spoke to him so openly now, because he was not one of her subjects, not someone who worshipped her or feared her. Hours later, they returned to the control hub. Systems hummed weakly, but for now they were stable. Daniel slumped into a chair, exhausted. Soraya stood beside him, gazing at the screens with quiet intensity. "You are different," she said finally. "You do not bow, you do not beg, yet you do not betray. You are unusual." Daniel smiled tiredly. "I'll take that as a compliment." Her golden eyes softened, and then to his surprise she smiled again. This time the smile lingered. In that moment Daniel realized something important. She was not just an alien ruler. She was someone searching for connection, just as he was. And for the first time since entering her ship, he felt that they were no longer enemies or strangers. They were something else entirely. The ship's halls were growing brighter as repairs continued, but not everyone inside shared the same hope. Unseen by Daniel, another pair of eyes had been watching. Deep within the broken vessel, one of Soraya's surviving officers had awakened from stasis days earlier. He had seen the human moving freely through the Queen's chambers, speaking with her as if they were equals. To him it was an insult. The Queen should not lower herself to trust a human, especially in such a fragile moment. His loyalty twisted into suspicion, and his suspicion into quiet anger. Daniel, unaware of the officer's presence, worked tirelessly. He had spent hours stabilizing the main energy conduits, and now he was running diagnostics on the navigation system. The display flickered with alien runes, but his translator helped enough for him to understand the basics. Soraya stood beside him, watching his work, her golden eyes focused. "You learn quickly," she said softly. "My engineers studied the system for years, and yet you adapt as though it were your own." Daniel gave a small smile, tightening a cable. "Machines speak a kind of language. Doesn't matter if it's human or alien, you just have to listen carefully." Soraya tilted her head, studying him. "Perhaps it is not the machines that you understand. Perhaps it is people. You repair more than circuits, Daniel. You repair trust." He paused, glancing up at her. For a moment he thought about how strange this was. A human engineer and an alien queen working side by side. It was something no one back home would believe. But here, in this damaged ship floating in endless space, it felt real. That night, if night could even be measured in the silent void, Daniel rested in one of the side chambers while the systems ran their cycles. He slept lightly, his mind half alert. He did not hear the quiet footsteps of the officer moving through the corridors, his eyes fixed on the reactor chamber. The officer muttered to himself in his native tongue, words filled with anger. To him, the human was dangerous, not because he was weak, but because he was gaining the Queen's trust. That was something he could not allow. The officer placed a device on one of the conduits, a small sabotage unit meant to destabilize the reactor. It would not destroy the ship outright, but it would cause chaos enough to show the Queen that trusting a human brought only danger. He slipped away into the shadows, unseen. The next cycle, Daniel returned to the reactor chamber with Soraya. He noticed the hum of the core sounded different, unsteady like a heart skipping beats. His eyes narrowed. "Something's wrong." Soraya stepped forward, her expression sharp. "Explain." Daniel scanned the conduits and quickly spotted the device. His stomach tightened. "Sabotage. Someone planted this." Before Soraya could answer, the reactor let out a violent surge, sparks flying as energy levels spiked dangerously. Daniel dove toward the panel, pulling out the device and tossing it aside. Alarm screamed through the chamber. "Get back!" he shouted, his hands moving in a blur as he tried to stabilize the flow. Soraya stayed close, her golden eyes flashing as she called commands to the ship, urging it to hold together. Daniel gritted his teeth. The power lines were overloading, and if he didn't reroute quickly, the core would blow. He forced two conduits together, sparks burning his hands, but the readings began to steady. With one final adjustment, the core's wild hum slowed into a steady rhythm again. He collapsed back against the wall, his breath ragged. That was close. Too close. Soraya's gaze turned cold as she picked up the sabotage device. This was not your doing. Daniel shook his head quickly. Of course not. Why would I risk my own life fixing it if I'd caused it? She did not answer at once. She stared at him for a long moment as though weighing every possibility. Finally, she turned away, her voice sharp. Show yourself. From the shadows of the chamber's entrance, the officer stepped forward. His eyes burned with anger, but his body bowed in fear of her command. My queen, he said, his tone filled with bitterness. This human deceives you. He twists your trust. I acted to protect you. Daniel rose to his feet, his fists clenched. Protect her? You nearly destroyed the entire ship, the officer sneered. Better the ship destroyed than our queen fooled by a weak outsider. Soraya's expression hardened, her voice carrying the weight of a ruler. You dare decide what is best for me, you who endangers my life and the survival of this vessel? Your loyalty has turned to poison. The officer lowered his head, trembling under her gaze. Daniel stood silently waiting, unsure what she would do. At last, Soraya turned toward him. You saved my ship again, she said firmly. Her eyes met his, clear and unwavering. And I choose to trust you, human, over one who would betray me under the guise of loyalty. Daniel felt a strange warmth in his chest at her words. She believed him. She believed in him. The officer's face twisted with despair as guards, summoned by Soraya's silent command, took him away. When the chamber grew quiet again, Daniel exhaled slowly. That was intense. Soraya looked at him, her face calm but her eyes softer than before. In my empire, trust is a rare gift. I gave it to you, and today you proved worthy of it. Daniel rubbed his burned hands, wincing at the pain. Glad I could keep us alive again. A faint smile touched her lips. Again. In that moment, Daniel understood that something between them had changed forever. It was no longer just about repairing her ship. It was about building something far greater. Trust between two souls from different worlds. The quiet after the betrayal was brief. Daniel had barely begun to recover from the reactor sabotage when the sensors flickered again. This time the readings were unmistakable. A massive signature appeared on the edge of the system, a dreadnought-class ship unlike anything he had ever seen. Its hull gleamed with lethal intent, and its energy output dwarfed even Soraya's powerful vessel. They are back, she said softly, her golden eyes fixed on the readouts. The Krail Dominion. They will not rest until I am captured or destroyed. Daniel's stomach tightened. How are we supposed to fight that? That thing could crush us in seconds. Soraya stepped closer to the console, her voice steady but low. We will not fight it as equals. We will fight it as survivors. As humans sometimes do. Daniel raised his eyebrows. I like that speech, but survival alone won't save us this time. She glanced at him, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Then we must be clever. You and I, human. We have one chance. One moment to strike before they close the distance. We must make it count. He nodded, understanding her meaning. They would have to improvise, to bend the laws of both human and alien engineering to their favor. Daniel rushed through the vessel, checking engines and power conduits. Soraya followed, giving instructions in her own language, her tone confident despite the looming threat. As the enemy dreadnought approached, smaller ships emerged from its hangars, swarming toward them like angry hornets. Daniel's hands flew over the controls, rerouting energy, stabilizing shields and priming weapon systems that had only recently been repaired. Soraya's voice called commands to the vessel, coaxing reluctant circuits and power conduits back to life. We cannot meet them head-on, Daniel said urgently. Our weapons won't hold for long. But maybe we can use the reactor. Soraya looked at him, understanding immediately. You mean the core? Overload it. Yes, he said. We control the release, focus it outward. It could disable their smaller ships and give us time to escape. It's risky. If I miscalculate. He let the thought hang in the air. Then we will calculate together, Soraya said firmly. I will not let my life or this ship be ended without trying. Daniel nodded. There was no time to argue philosophy. They worked quickly, moving through the ship's reactor chamber, connecting conduits, monitoring output, and synchronizing the overload sequence. Sparks flew across the floor as Daniel forced energy lines to bend beyond their usual limits. Soraya chanted commands in her native tongue, her voice steady and commanding. The ship itself seemed to respond, pulsing as if it understood the gravity of what was about to happen. Outside, the Krail fleet closed in. Beams of energy struck the hull, making the entire vessel shudder violently. Daniel gritted his teeth. Almost there. Keep her steady. Soraya placed her hand on the main console, her golden eyes locked on him. We do this together. Ready? He swallowed hard. Ready. At her signal, Daniel triggered the overload. The reactor glowed with blinding intensity, energy arcing across the conduits and racing through the ship like a living storm. The walls vibrated, and sparks rained down from the ceiling. Daniel's hands were scorched and his face was sweaty and burned, but he did not stop. The ship surged forward, releasing the energy in a controlled wave. Outside, smaller enemy ships were shredded instantly, torn apart by the shock. Even the dreadnought's shields flickered under the blast. Daniel and Soraya held their positions, watching as the carefully timed overload succeeded beyond expectation. The dreadnought staggered, its massive guns firing wildly as it tried to recover. But the smaller craft were gone, scattered into the void, and the wave had left the enemy fleet weakened. For the first time, Daniel allowed himself a breath of relief. We did it, he panted, looking at her. Soraya did not respond immediately. She watched the monitors as the enemy ship withdrew, her eyes sharp, calculating. Then slowly she turned to him. Enough to survive for now. You saved this ship and you saved my life. Daniel smiled faintly, though exhaustion weighed on him. We did it together. Can't forget that part. Her lips curved into a small, genuine smile. Together. Yes, perhaps more than that, human. The ship groaned, almost as if it approved, but Daniel knew it had been pushed to its limits. We'll need to repair her fully before the Krail come back, he said, nodding toward the reactor and engine systems. Right now, she's alive, but barely. Soraya's gaze softened. She stepped closer, her presence commanding yet gentle. I have never trusted anyone like I trust you, Daniel, and yet, we cannot linger in safety. There is work to do, both on this ship and within myself. Daniel felt a strange warmth in her words. She was acknowledging him, not just as an engineer or a helper, but as someone who mattered. It was a feeling he had never experienced with anyone, human or alien. He straightened, determination rising within him. Then let's finish this. We'll rebuild her stronger, faster, smarter, and next time the Krail won't know what hit them. Soraya's eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, a mixture of pride and something more, something she did not yet name. Then we have a future, Daniel, but it will not be easy, and it may not be safe. Daniel's hands clenched into fists. I've never done anything worth doing that was easy, and I've never wanted safe if it meant leaving you alone out here. She studied him for a long moment, her golden eyes filled with an emotion that was difficult to define. Trust, gratitude, and maybe something deeper. At last, she nodded slowly. Then let us prepare. Together, human. We will face whatever comes next, side by side. For the first time since the dreadnought appeared, Daniel allowed himself a small smile. The galaxy was dangerous, their enemies powerful, and the ship still wounded. But they had survived. Together. And that unity, fragile and new, might be their greatest weapon yet. The battle had passed, leaving the ship battered but alive. The corridors still flickered with unstable lights, and the hum of the engines was weak but steady. Daniel moved carefully through the vessel, checking the repaired systems and making minor adjustments. Each panel he touched reminded him of how far they had come, from a broken, lifeless wreck to a ship with a pulse, a vessel that could still soar among the stars. Soraya followed quietly, her golden eyes observing everything with sharp awareness. She no longer walked with the same rigid formality that had marked her arrival. Instead, she moved with a mix of weariness and grace, the weight of command softened slightly by relief. Her gaze often lingered on Daniel, watching him work with a respect that had grown since their first encounter. "You have done more than repair a ship," she said softly, her voice carrying in the empty hall. "You have restored hope." Daniel smiled faintly, wiping grease from his hands. "We did it together. I wouldn't have made it without you guiding me." Soraya paused, her eyes catching the glow from the partially restored reactor. "I have led fleets and ruled planets, yet I have never felt such a partnership. Perhaps I underestimated humans." Daniel chuckled. "Maybe we're not as small or weak as everyone thinks. Sometimes it just takes the right person to see it." They walked to the main chamber, the throne room, now partially restored. Broken panels had been replaced, and the faint hum of the ship filled the air like a heartbeat. Soraya approached her throne carefully, placing a hand on its armrest. The gesture was simple, yet it held immense weight, the gesture of a queen reclaiming her power but not her distance. Daniel remained standing, unsure how to act in a place that felt so alive with authority. Then he realized that he no longer feared her presence. He had fought beside her, repaired her ship, and shared dangers that few could imagine. He had earned her trust, and in that trust was something deeper than duty. Soraya looked at him, her golden eyes glowing softly. "You could leave now, human. Return to your ship, your life. My fleet will rebuild and my empire will continue." Daniel hesitated, the words heavy on his tongue. He had a life waiting for him among humans, simple, predictable, safe. But those days seemed distant now. He had faced death and danger, seen courage and loyalty, and had glimpsed something he never expected: connection, respect, and perhaps even friendship that could grow into more. "I could leave," he said slowly, "but I don't want to. Not yet. Not now." Her eyes softened, and a faint, genuine smile curved her lips. "I wondered if you might say that." She stepped closer, the weight of her presence both commanding and comforting. "You see me not just as a queen or a ruler, but as something more, perhaps someone worth staying for." Daniel felt a warmth spread through him, a mixture of relief, surprise, and something he did not have a word for. He had been wary of trust, of danger, of everything he could lose. But here, in the quiet aftermath of survival, he realized that some risks were worth taking. Soraya extended her hand, not in command, but in invitation. "Stay with me, Daniel. Not as a servant, not as a soldier, but as someone I choose to have beside me. I offer more than my ship, more than my gratitude. I offer companionship, partnership, a chance to be part of something greater." Daniel looked at her hand, then into her golden eyes. The universe outside was vast, dangerous, and uncertain, yet he had never felt a moment so certain. He had seen courage, determination, and honor in her, and he had learned the same about himself. He stepped forward, taking her hand. "I'll stay," he said simply, letting the words carry all the weight of his choice. "Not because I have to, but because I want to. I want to be here, with you. Whatever comes next, we face it together." Soraya's smile widened slightly, a rare, genuine expression that softened even the hard edges of her regal presence. "Then it is settled," she said. "We begin anew. Together." The ship seemed to respond to their decision. The hum of the engine strengthened, lights stabilized across the corridors, and even the air felt warmer, alive with the pulse of life returning. Outside, stars stretched endlessly, waiting for the vessel to reclaim its place among them. Daniel looked around at the restored systems, the corridors filled with quiet energy, and then at Soraya. He realized that the ship was not the only thing repaired. Trust, respect, and something deeper had been built, brick by careful brick, in the wake of battles, dangers, and late-night conversations in dimly lit corridors. Soraya placed her hand on his shoulder gently. "The galaxy is vast," she said, "and danger will come again. But now we are not alone. We face it together, human." He smiled, feeling a sense of peace he had never known. Together, he agreed. For the first time in what felt like centuries, the alien queen smiled freely, without constraint or calculation. And for Daniel, the human engineer, that smile was enough. It was a promise of partnership, of adventures yet to come, and of a bond that bridged the stars. As they stood side by side, the ship alive beneath them and the universe stretched before them, Daniel realized something profound. Life in the galaxy was uncertain, full of battles, losses, and unknown dangers, but it also offered moments of connection, courage, and choice. And in that moment, he chose to face all of it with Soraya. The Queen's hand remained in his, steady and warm. "Stay with me," she said softly, and Daniel did.